Hello and welcome to another episode of 1000 Actually Fun Books, where we review books of every genre, looking for the best of fun escapist books. So today I'm doing a book called The Guernsey Literary Society and The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by Mary Ann Shaffer and Annie Barrows. So, quite the title. So it is a historical fiction, almost exclusively with some light romance in there. So the book is about a writer who decides to, she's looking for basically another story to write, kind of background. That's what she's doing. She's traveling around promoting her latest book. And while she's doing that, the entire book is styled as letters. So she writes letters to her editor, she writes letters to her best friend, she writes letters to a lot of people. And people write letters to her. So right at the beginning, somebody writes her a letter and said, "Hey, I found a book that you used to own, and I loved this book. Are there any other books by this author? I am part of the Guernsey Literary Potato Peel Pie Society, and we're looking for better books, and I would like one by this author if you know of any." So she writes back and basically tells him a little bit about herself and the book and the author. She's basically like, "Yes, I loved that book. Here's some more information about that author." And they start kind of a correspondence. And she learns a lot about what was going on during World War II on one of the Channel Islands. This is Guernsey Island, in between England and France. So this was where the historical fiction takes place. So this story is set in 1946, right after World War II. And a lot of the correspondence deals with what happened on this island during World War II. And this is the historical part of the historical fiction. So the fiction is all this, our characters and them writing to each other and the romance. But the historical part is what actually happened on the island during World War II. So this is an English island, but Hitler's army, the Axis powers, got control of and invaded this island and all that went on with that. If you crossed them, you were sent off to the concentration camps. So it is an interesting mix. You have two different things kind of going on. You got the present day, the letter writing, and our main character learning about all the different people on the island and the things that happened to them. And then you have the, in the letters, kind of them saying, "And this is what happened." We had to kill our pets, and we had to send our children away, and we starved, and a whole bunch of horrible things. And the present day is a lot more lighthearted, so it's got two different kind of tones going on there. So I will say I liked the way the author handled that. The author did a fantastic job balancing the really depressing parts of World War II with lighthearted, humorous romance stuff going on, relationship drama happening in the present day of 1946. So the author did a great job with that. Our characters, almost all of them are fantastic. They are very individual and interesting and have personality, even coming through letters, because everything is written as a letter style. So you can only get what people say about somebody else and how they write about their own story and how they write about somebody else. So that can be very interesting on who the characters are. Now, not every single character, because, some people will write a single, one-page letter, "This is my experience with this one thing." And so you don't really get to know that person, but the characters that you get lots of letters about and through and for or whatever, those people you get to know really well, and they did a good job with that. The style letter writing. So this can be off-putting for some people. I don't mind it. I actually thought that for this book, did a good job with it. Because with the letter writing style, you get snippets. You don't have to do a whole bunch of exposition. You don't have to do a lot of descriptives. You don't have to do the transition to get from here to there on your story. You know, a lot of time can pass just because nobody wrote a letter during that time or whatever. And so because of that, it actually does really well in certain circumstances. And this one handled it well. I didn't feel like you got lost too badly. There are certainly some times where it would have been nice to be a little bit more present in the story. But overall, I think the author handled it well, and it worked out really well for this story. So I like that. The humor. Okay, so the humor is good in this, especially at the beginning when you're just getting to know the characters. It does, get more serious the more you learn about the World War II stuff, because, the World War II stuff is pretty grim and awful. But the author does a fantastic job with making that lighthearted. Like you talk about, one letter somebody is talking about the experience in a concentration camp. And then next you have somebody talking about their friend who has a book that made them want to try and tell the future by reading the bumps on somebody's head. And that's just ridiculous and silly. And it doesn't come across tonally deaf. Instead, it kind of lightens it up, adds that sparks of humor so it's not totally depressing when you talk about the World War II stuff. But anyway, so it does some humor. And I'll just read one small paragraph of somebody, which I just thought was kind of a funny paragraph, is she's getting ready for a date. As Madame Helena said, "The hares, they are a disaster." I tried a roll. It fell down. A French twist. It fell down. I was on the verge of tying an enormous red velvet bow to the top of my head when my neighbor, Eveline Smith, came to the rescue. Bless her. She's a genius with my hair. In 2 minutes, I was the picture of elegance. She had caught up all the curls, swirled them around in the back. I could even move my head. I just thought that was an amusing way to get ready for a date. So she was having fun. So you've got several things like that, where it's just a humorous way it's stated, humorous situations, they will send short notices, everything is in letter, but sometimes it's in a telegram form because they want it there quicker. Because they do have telephones, and they talk about telephones in this, but they're generally bad connections and it doesn't work very well, and that is not an ideal form of communication. So it's mostly letter writing. Anyway, so it can be fun where they're like, write something, a big long letter, and then immediately after there's a telegram because they're like, wait, I was wrong, or I take it back, or something like that, to try and get there quicker. Okay, so the historical details are pretty incredible in this book. You can tell that our authors did a lot of research on what happened in these isles during World War II. They talk about the Germans brought basically a slave force over to do some building projects, and they were allowed to roam the island like scavengers, at night, because then they didn't have to feed them. And the idea, the philosophy was all, work them to death. Work them until they are exhausted and fall down dead. That was the philosophy. And so, the horrors of that. And then there is the England finally brought them some relief materials through the Red Cross. And what they got is, a little package, and every person on the island got this little package, and it was food measured in ounces, 3 ounces of butter, 1 ounce of salt, that kind of thing, 8 ounces of flour. And you just think about that, they had a dozen of these little packages of something, and it was such a relief because the people were basically starving on this island because they couldn't get anything. And the German soldiers were taking everything, and so it was just horrible. Anyway, so the historical details, the author did a great job tracking those down, and it was pretty fascinating, if a little heart-wrenching. So the romance. The romance was also really good on this. So you start out with our main character, the author of the book that she's going to write and has written. Anyway, she's Juliet, is our main character, and she is, worried that she should have settled for something less in the past because she's now feeling old and hasn't been married, and somebody shows an interest in her. And so you have kind of a romance going on. And the author did such a good job because it doesn't come across necessarily as bad, but there's a whole bunch of hints that it's not really a great match. For example, the author, not the author, the Juliet is, they want to have a date. So the gentleman that she's dating writes to her and says, pick a day, any day of the week, and I will accommodate you. And so she's like, okay, Thursday. And he comes back and goes, no, it's too far, Monday at 8 at this restaurant. And she goes back, okay. So notice what happened there. He offered her anything. She suggested something, and he completely railroaded over her. Nope, not that, we're doing this instead. And he does that several times throughout the book, where you kind of just get this very controlling, not necessarily a mean person, but somebody who's used to having their way and assumes that she will just do whatever he wants. And she does for a lot of it, but isn't thrilled about that all the time. But he really wants to marry her. And then you find the other character throughout, which I won't spoil even though it is probably pretty obvious, but a different character that she falls in love with over the course of the book. So she ends up refusing the first character and choosing the next character. And it's much sweeter, much more gentle. And again, it's through letters, so you don't really have them doing anything. And it's at a time in society where they wouldn't anyway. They don't even so much as kiss in the story. There's no anything. There might have been some hand-holding, maybe. I'm not even sure that there was that much. Just more the character relationships getting to know each other. And so it's a very sweet, gentle, a cozy romance, which I like. And it's not a big part of the book. You do have a lot of fun in the humor with it, where somebody's poking at her, like, I see you mention that person a lot. And she's like, no, what are you talking about? That kind of thing. More so than a typical romance where you see a romantic comedy going on or whatever. So the romance is really sweet and good, and I like that. So pretty much everything about this book is really worth reading. It's a good book, well done, humorous, engaging. I was really interested in finishing it. This is the kind of book that you sit down and just, kind of keep wanting to read to find out what's going on with all these characters. So the dislike, the only thing I could really say I dislike are two small things, one of which you really can't get away with. It's because it's dealing with World War II. And I'm just going to say the horrors of World War II it's just so awful. It's heartbreaking how absolutely wickedly evil humanity can be to other people. It's just ugly. And I do not love seeing the ugly side of people. So this had a lot of the ugliness in World War II, and I don't enjoy that. It's not fun to read about a concentration camp survivor and all the different ways people died. There's a lot of death in this, honestly, of people mentioning, and this person went off to war and their ship crashed or torpedoed and they drowned. And this person was killed by German soldiers, and this person was taken away and never seen again, and this person died in childbirth, and this person, and it just keeps going on and on. Again, sprinkles, and most of the characters where this happens, with one exception, is, you don't really care about the characters because you don't know them personally. This is just a mention of something that happened. But even then, you're just like, it's just awful, because World War II was awful. Okay, the only other thing I disliked was there's only two bad guy characters that you really get to know at all in any way. One of which is the character that Juliet at first is dating. And you don't really consider this so much a bad guy. Like, he is not an evil person. Like I said before, he's just kind of selfish. And he seems to care about Juliet. He doesn't do anything that makes him a bad bad guy, but he's kind of a negative character. And I have no problem with him as a character. The other one, the only other character here in this, and this is the one that irritates me, is the somebody who's not a Christian stereotypes an evil Christian as a, nose in the air, holier than thou person who only joy in life is to make other people miserable, making children cry, that kind of thing. As being a Christian myself, I did not enjoy that kind of stereotype because I don't, it's a stereotype, and it's an ugly stereotype. And, it makes me feel like the author is, oh, here's a group that's okay to make fun of Christians. And, that can be irritating. But she is not a big part of this book, just like 3 different letters plus mentions here and there. So it's not a big deal, but it's irritating because, nobody likes prejudice against their own group. Okay. Overall, however, I'm going to give this a huge thumbs up. I thought it was very well done. If you like historical fiction with light romance, this would be a book for you. It was well done. It was enjoyable. Okay, so my other book, the next one I'm going to do is a murder mystery. The Word is Murder by Anthony Horowitz. And I don't know anything about it other than it's a murder mystery. And I like murder mysteries, so hopefully that one will be clever and fun and, can follow along with the detective. Okay, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this and will follow me next time.